Hey, hi. Welcome to Dvija Projects. At Dvija, we are all about experiential learning, and we congratulate you on having started your journey for a live project. And we hope to be of help in this effort of yours. In this lesson, let's try and understand what an academic project is and why is there a need for such a project in every student's life before they graduate a particular course. Academic projects are student research projects, and these are carried out as part of any research, or in these days, it's also being introduced as part of your postgraduate or even undergraduate degrees. For example, your final year undergraduate dissertation or a master project or a PhD research thesis is also part of this. Now, let's try and understand, some of the objectives for undertaking. Now, these objectives come from the academia, the university or the college or your teachers, and sometimes your parents, or it could be yourself, right? This is a collection of all such objectives. But note that all these are aimed at benefiting one single person. And who's that? That's you, the student in you who should get benefit. And that's what the whole ecosystem is trying to deliver through these academic projects. Let's quickly try and look at some of these objectives as to what they can be. As you can see in the slide, the first one is practical exposure to real world problems. Now, education is predominantly theoretical. What I mean by that is either you're in a classroom listening to a lecture and learning from it, or you're reading a book, or you're watching something and you're learning from it. But learning is solidified when you get your hands dirty in terms of doing something yourself. That's when you reinforce your learning, and that's the practical exposure. And that's what Dvija is all about, is how can we provide for the practical exposure. And again, we're talking about real world problems. What we mean by that is, depending on whatever field area you choose as your job or profession, every day is a situation that you're going to handle and solve. So those are the situations you're going to be prepared for. Second is synthesizing the theoretical learnings. Most part of it I've already covered explaining the previous point. Then you have the application of knowledge on solving a business problem. A lot of us have many views, a lot of us have opinions about how certain things to be done, especially after you hear on an issue and how that issue has been solved, right? Most of us are very good at commenting. Now, an academic project, especially when you go after an experiential learning or you do a live project, it helps you build a structure into how you're going to go about solving a business problem. Then you have the readiness for professional career, the way you talk, the words you speak, the thought process that you bring in, the critical thinking capabilities that you bring in. All those are something that could be developed with an academic project. And more important these days, your interpersonal skills, because it is all about working in teams. It's all about working with people whom you don't even see. And time and age has changed. Today, you may be interacting with a chat bot. For all you know, it could be a robot sitting on the other side and trying to provide a service or trying to help you solve a problem. So interpersonal skills, it's not just about dealing with people now, it's also talking to machines and making them work for you to solve the business problem. Well, finally, the knowledge, right? The knowledge matures when you really realize what it is through a personal experience. Finally, not finally, we have many more benefits that can come of this. Exposure to employable concepts or skills, right? I mean, a lot of the way how we work is influenced by the culture and the country, the place of your birth, and where you're living, where you're working, and the kind of the company. Is it a homegrown company? Is it a multinational operating in a different country? So there are a lot of concepts and skills. And when you do a live project, you get that experience and exposure of dealing with multiple people. and you also pick up some skills. So, I'm going to quickly run through the other 4 points. It's about gaining skills valued by the industry, working in multidisciplinary in terms of different fields, and also, the universities would like each one of us, the students, to get corporate exposure, which is where they encourage you to do a live project. And eventually, it gives you an opportunity to get instant feedback. When you're reading a textbook, you're not getting feedback, but you get feedback when you're going to be on a live project. A quick the benefits of academic projects. I think we have seen them all in the previous slide, but just real quick to reconnect. You get the ability to connect to the world of academia, especially transitioning from textbooks to the real world, which is outside, understand real people, real problems, real expectations. So everything's going to be real about it. And then, you get to engage directly with the complexities, especially when you're trying to solve a real problem, right? A live project. What is a live project, right? It's live project because it's a real issue that you're trying to fix, right? It's not a fictitious problem or a game that 3 or 4 people are playing and then you have a situation to solve. Here is a problem that could help a business increase its sales. It might help business bring down cost, or it might help a business to launch a new product line. So no idea is a small idea, no problem is a small problem, especially if it is dealt with in the right manner, and a live project is going to give you that exposure. Benefits, again, quick summary. It helps you build the collaborative and participatory skills. It gives you the awareness of being very socially responsible when you're trying to solve the problem, because it's not just about the person who's reported. Now, the way you solve it could actually have an impact, both positively as well as negatively, with the ecosystem around you. It can impact the nature, it can impact the company, it can impact people, it can impact other creatures. So your social responsibility also comes to the fore. And again, it helps you to make a difference to all the communities. I mean, it could be a social welfare project or a problem that you want to solve, or even within the company, wherein we have to be conscious of the various players in the ecosystem, right? Overall, it enriches your learning experience. So finally, it's all about experience project, right? So experiential project is learning by doing and applying the training to real world problems, right? So let's use the skills that you already have, the inherent skills that you have. How do they really come out in the open, right? We sit in a closed room, you're looking at a textbook, those skills are not going to come. Yes, some of them in terms of how you're able to understand, perceive, and memorize. But the vision and the goals that you set and your skills are really going to go to the next level when you really work on an experiential problem, solving a real problem and working with multitude of people and the ecosystem at large in solving. So it helps you to gradually move from a closed-ended problem. What I mean by that is something which is there in a textbook, which already has the solution also towards the last page, and also gives you the framework to solve, versus a real-life problem where you're not holding a textbook and looking for a solution, but you're thinking what all you've learned and how you can apply some of or more of what you learned to solve a problem. And most of the times you'll realize what you've learned may not be enough. It's your common sense which is also going to come in. It's also exchanging and sharing and encouraging others to provide feedback and ideas to solve the problem. So these are the ultimate benefits. Experience, right? That's all this is all about, right? How do you get that real experience? And in all the previous slides, we have seen enough, we have spoken enough about the benefits that are coming of transitioning from a theoretical to an experiential learning through any live projects. And as you can read from this slide, these projects, they establish a direct link between what we have read at school and the application of what we have learned. It is also helping learners develop good communication skills. Now, communication skills does not mean you're just speaking words in whatever be the language of communication, right? Be it English, French, or Hindi, or any language in the country that you're working. The successful communicator is the person who's been able to effectively convey the message to the recipient. And it's not about talking in a room. Your project should give you that access to communicate to vendors over a phone, or to your potential customer, or to a colleague who's working in a different country. So that's the communication that we are talking about. And when you're working on a live project, you have an issue that somebody is facing, and that's the communication skill that we need to develop, where we are able to effectively communicate and convey the message on the issue and how we are solving it. It also challenges creativity, because you're going to be on the spot in maybe most of the situations where you're expected to provide an answer, or you're expected to analyze certain data and provide interpretation, or simply be creative to a very small problem. It could be just one of the PCs is not running fine, or the video conferencing is not going on well. And so it can also challenge your creativity on what you're going to do. If you're solving an engineering problem or a mathematical problem, and kind of push those boundaries. And it also fosters your independence, because yes, there is a group thinking wherein you're working in a team, but you're also trying to show your presence by contributing individually in terms of your thought process, and also contributing to an idea if there is a workshop, and so on. Right? So yes, you can be independent. At the same time, it is also going to help you co-op with your other colleagues or peers or students as part of this project, and also work on collective learning. And finally, decision making and critical thinking, right? Whatever be your designation, whatever be your title, whatever be your role, increasingly we see the job descriptions are very ambiguous. People are, yes, expected to be having deep domain expertise, but yet in some ways you also should know a lot of what is happening outside of your domain. That critical thinking and decision making are two things that whatever you could be the junior most employee, but in your scope there are decisions that you need to make, and which would require critical thinking, especially with the way the technology trends are changing, the newer business challenges or problems that are coming, and hence everybody has a contribution to make. So, finally, doing a good project is the first step in getting exposed to real professional life. And, believe me, I've gone through this, I've been there, and every student, after completion of this program, I'm sure is anxious to go. And we want you to be successful, not just in the way you're going to do this project. We want you to be successful moving on in life. And we believe doing an experiential project is going to give you all those skills and attributes, if not all, but at least it will set you in that road ahead, in picking up skills that would be required for you to be successful in your career and finally in your life. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your patience, and happy projects at dvijaprojects.com. Hi, welcome again to Dvija Projects. Today's lesson is going to focus around skill development. Now, skill is a term that we have heard a lot in each of our lives. The way while growing up at home with your parents, your relatives, your siblings, your neighbors, and at school, the teachers, and sometimes our friends, and sometimes even strangers. So skill is a big part of our makeup, how we are trained to do a particular task. as well as how we are inherently built in terms of how we go about solving a particular task, right? So to summarize, it's the ability to do something well. Yes, we are also trained to do particular tasks, but we also, use our common sense in terms of how we want to go about solving certain tasks. Now, coming through learning, through the project's framework, broadly, we can classify skills to be production, management, and critical. The production is the technical aspect of it, and the management is how you really manage the process you're going to adopt in employing your technical skills in solving the problem, and how you also would bring in the critical aspect of problem solving and work with the group in solving. So broadly, production skills, management skills, and critical skills. As we go through the next slides, we will delve into the details of what these are. The design skills or the production skills, this is technical. What I mean by that is, you basically try to understand what is the situation on hand to solve the problem, right? We all have, our own ways of looking at the problem, and depending on the color of the lens that you're wearing, your reading of the problem might be very different from what the other person is perceiving the problem to be. So problem definition is a very critical aspect of any project. For that matter, any situation that we have on hand, be it a life situation or a situation at work, is for us to clearly understand what the problem is. Also, most of the times we tend to get confused with the symptom of the problem versus, sometimes it is about what we need, we think is also a problem with the way we describe. So problem definition, we are not really getting into the details of how you go about defining a problem, but I strongly urge you to read up material which will be available for you in Dvija to understand the problem. The next part is the solution design on how you go about preparing to use the details about the problem to solve it. Problem analysis, again, you're going to learn certain tools and techniques in terms of understanding all the critical factors that are causing the problem. To put it simply, it is a factor. Y is a factor of many x's, and x's being the factors that are going to cause the problems, and how collectively a multiple x's can result in one bigger problem, and y could be the solution that you're expecting, and for which also you need to handle each of these factors that have a role to play in providing the solution towards the problem. So the problem analysis, and there is going to be a decision making, right? So you know what the problem is, you've also done your analysis, you've also come up with multiple options or one option in terms of how you can go about solving that problem. And when you have multiple options, you need to make a decision on what is the right thing to do so that the problem can be addressed for the best interest of not just the person who's solving it, but to every single other individual who is impacted by this problem. And eventually, it's also about educating everyone on what really happened and how a problem is solved, or how a project is handled. So it's all about putting in a good report and putting the document together, sharing all your experiences, and drafting it in a manner that every reader is able to comfortably understand, and also get some great knowledge out of that experience. You can also be running participatory events or workshops where you can go about sharing, and we have TED workshops. At some point you will also see Dvija hosting some of these sessions where you can come and share your experience. Okay, we are now moving on to management skills, right? Now, it is not an individual who's sitting in a closed room trying to solve a problem when it comes to a real business problem. It is about working with others. It's about working with superiors. It's about working with colleagues, peers. It's about working with juniors. It could be between white collar workers, blue collar workers. It could be with functional teams, technical teams. It could be folks on the research side. It could be folks who are completely unrelated to your enterprise but have an impact, say, with the government. That's what management skill is all about, is your ability in building a good team, or your ability to work in a team which can collectively understand, analyze a problem, and also solve it for the best interest of everybody. Right? So organizing a project team becomes very critical. There are different roles to be played, and each role has to be properly decided. The roles and responsibilities have to be established and properly communicated. All the stakeholders, identification of all these stakeholders. Now, who are these stakeholders? These are people who could be impacted by a problem, or when you solve it, maybe this individual doesn't have an issue, but when you solve the problem, say for party A, the solution may likely impact the party B, and hence it is important to also identify who are all facing the problem, who are those individuals who could potentially be impacted if the problem is being resolved. And you may have other players in the ecosystem, for example, a government, and any legislation from the government that could also impact the way you can solve this issue. So stakeholder communication becomes very important. And then finally, programming, right? And by programming, what we mean here is putting in the entire project plan, the program plan, the whole aspects in terms of budgeting on how you want to go about solving this problem. And then comes your resourcing, ensuring all resources. It's not just about people. We're also talking about technology. We're also talking about tools, alongside, of course, able men who can support in running this project. There also has to be a discipline in terms of how you run meetings, and we have multiple many techniques that are out there. You may not follow a waterfall method. You could be following an agile or a lean method of how you want to run your meetings, or how you want to go about solving a problem, how you want to get validation from your stakeholders or customers sooner as you take up this journey of solving the problem. So running meetings is a very critical part on how you're going to bring everybody in, how you ensure that the right message is being communicated in the right fashion, how you organize these workshops where people can come together, how you set agenda for each of these meetings, and how you handle communication of some critical aspects of the program. So running meetings is a very important part. Also about managing expectations. We earlier talked about the stakeholders, we talked about stakeholder communication, and we also need to understand the expectations and ensure that the stakeholder analysis is done, and then the timely communication is happening in a manner that the expectations are managed. Now, not all the time you're going to be meeting every single person's expectation, but it is critical for us to understand what those expectations are, and hence we can have plans towards communicating it in the right manner if not expectations are going to be met. Eventually, of course, everything is about delivering on time, and that's something I guess you understand pretty well. So let's move on to the next slide. Now it's the turn for critical skills, right? Let's just understand a few terminologies here, like zoom in, zoom out, and the big picture thinking. Most of the times when you have a situation to solve, we tend to focus, and that's how it should be. We should focus on what the actual problem is and try and solve it. But we may also miss out in understanding the whole ecosystem, right? There are multiple players in, and in the previous slide, we briefly touched upon stakeholders. right? So that's what we mean by the wider context here is what is the impact of the problem that I face? Is it just for my team? Is it just for me? Is it just for my team? Or is it just for my department? Is it just for the location where I'm working? Or is it enterprise wide? Or is it just for me? Or are there many other companies which also have this issue? So it's also important to zoom in when you're working on the problem to exactly understand. And as we saw in the first or the second slide about the technical skills, right? The problem definition, wherein you really need to zoom in on the problem and get all the facts about it. But while you do so, it's also critical to zoom out and understand the entire ecosystem and everybody else who's involved, right? Also, you need to really reflect upon your role. End of the day, there should be roles and responsibilities that are defined, and everybody should be playing up to their role. Yes, in one of our lessons, we also saw how increasingly the job descriptions are becoming ambiguous, and we are not having very clear roles and responsibilities being defined in the current day and age on how the business enterprises are being run. However, there should be a broad definition so that we are not stepping into other shoes all the time, and that could result in a conflict in terms of how we really work well in teams. So it's important you understand your role. Now, if you have any questions, please don't stop. Please go ahead, talk to others, talk to your manager, and try and get some clarity around your role. The third point, impact of the project on your clients. We have also discussed it alongside with point one. So I'm going to just skip that. The fourth point is reflecting upon what you've learned. Now, feedback is so important. Now, feedback is not always about getting it from an external source or from other individuals. It is also for you to take some time, maybe get a glass of juice or get a glass of beer, whatever you like, and reflect upon what you have done, how you have gone about, engaging in this project, what your role was, what is it that you've learned, and what are those learnings that you're going to take forward, right? And eventually putting it all in a piece of paper as the lessons and what it means for where you want to go in your career. How are you going to leverage on some of these learnings to build your career so you're successful? So after critical skills, we are now moving to the application of knowledge. Now, this is, in essence, a culmination of everything that we have seen in the last three slides, right? The management skills, the problem skills, and then finally the critical skills. Collectively, all of this put together would help you in acquiring knowledge, which is what you see against A. It is also going to help you in terms of application of that knowledge. And we also understood how the application is something wherein we could be trained to apply that knowledge. It's a question of using, for example, if you're doing a stock analysis, or a fund analysis, or you're solving an engineering problem, you pick an equation, and then you solve a mathematical problem, and with the result, you try to interpret what it could be. So, and there are certain management skills also that you would have acquired in terms of how do you really engage with a tough stakeholder, for example, right? Not everybody is going to be your friend, especially when you're going to have multiple ways of doing things or multiple solutions that could be provided. Everybody is going to have their own choice. So the management skills and the problem solving skills and how you apply. So you acquire knowledge, you learn about application of that knowledge in really seeing and solving some real world issues. And also the assimilation of this whole thing on how you internalize all the learnings that you have got, so that you're able to register, reflect, record, and finally carry forward these learnings in adapting it. It's all about internalizing, so it becomes part and parcel of your personality on how you go about solving problems, not just now, but in the future as well. We are moving on to personal skill development. Now, please don't mistake, every other skill that you've learned earlier is also, personal skill. What we have here is the core academics, stretch learning, learner engagement, and personal skill development. But why we are highlighting these four here is these are the four steps that will help you graduate from an academic knowledge to a personal skill development. And as we have seen in the other slides, in other lessons at Dvija, it is all about helping you, encouraging you to transition from a theoretical learning to experiential learning. And by really encouraging you to take up steps, small or big, in how you can pick up some of these skills. So we will learn more about that in the next slides. So now coming to core academics, right? Core academics is the fundamental knowledge, and this is what your project should, put into application. Now, you're an IT student. Naturally, you're trying to pick a problem that will help you apply the learnings that you have from your course. For example, you want to do a project on blockchain. You want to use artificial intelligence, or you want to pick a business application and then use Java to solve this, right? So it could be computer science, it could be engineering, commerce, whatever be the core subject. So that should become the basis or the fundamental for you to build that knowledge. We are now going to stretch learning. Now, a project work also helps you stretch the theoretical knowledge that you have, to application, right? Now, why are we using this word stretch here? Stretch is, where you're not restricting your thought process to, some of them by heart, or you may just get the basics or the fundamentals of what you have learned at school or from the textbooks. Now, it requires a different set of thought process on how you identify a problem that will fit into what you have learned at school in terms of any management principle or a formula on how you apply that formula to this problem and solve, right? So that's going to take some stretch from you to really think about it. And the next step is around student engagement. Right? Student engagement is about application of knowledge in how we identify a real world problem that is linked to course, and how we build relationships wherein you can leverage all the management skills that we talked of earlier. So projects, they provide you the opportunity, basically, when it's going to be a group activity wherein you've got 3 or 4 of your colleagues or your fellow students who are going to work alongside you in solving a real business or a social problem, right? It also gives you a sense of belongingness and accomplishment, and not just for you, for the entire team. And it helps you build that relationship. And sometimes it could be just, that's what is going to happen in a company. You might be pulled into a meeting. You could have some colleagues that you don't know of from a different department, and how we all come together to solve an issue. Now moving. So you would see, we are transitioning gradually with the way the slides have moved. We first talked about some technical skills in terms of understanding or knowing how to define a problem. We talked about how you need to pick up some management skills on how you really engage with others in solving, and we talked about building critical skills. So these are from a skill perspective. And then we graduated to, as a student, how, you try to pick up a project that is part and parcel of the course subject that you have at college or at school. and how you learn to apply that, how you try and build a team for yourself, with some of your fellow students, and then you start, deploying the technical skills, the management skills, and the critical skills that you have gained. Now, all these skills collectively, when you work with a team and when you employ all these skills, that's when you're going to build the skills that are needed for the job, right? So project work will provide you for the very first time in your learning life a way to measure your personal, social, and leadership skills. It also will help you understand the positive behaviors that you're able to demonstrate, that you can see from your fellow colleagues, and of course, is also going to bring out the negativity out in the open, right? Okay. To sum it all, it's the five skills that are very critical for any job. And believe me, the first interview that's going to give you the job is when you're able to demonstrate how you have all these five skills, right? You're not going to have an opportunity to say, okay, here is my communication skill, this is how I speak, and this is my integrity, this is how I speak. No. But whether the person, the interviewer, records it on paper or not, but broadly, these are the five things that you should try and demonstrate, in not any particular sequence, but with how you quote certain instances, events, in how you've gone about your academic pursuits, and your live project experience. So communication skills is self-explanatory, and we have also discussed earlier. The teamwork, we also spoke about it. The interpersonal skills, we also spoke about how it is critical when you're working in teams, and also how it is important to manage the stakeholder communication. And then we also talked about problem solving skills, wherein you're trying to showcase your individual ability to provide some critical thinking, at the same time leverage on the expertise of people and how you can collectively bring all this to the forefront. Now, integrity, right? This is the core of who you are, who we are. And integrity at workplace, integrity at how we have gone about picking the right problem, integrity at how we have gone about keeping everybody communicated at the same time with the real message, without without hiding any facts from people. Integrity at how you are sincere in terms of maintaining your interpersonal relationships. The integrity in terms of how the entire project is going to be managed and how you keep every other stakeholder, it could be your college, your teachers, your guide, your customers, everybody properly informed. I think it's going to play a pivotal role in how you become successful in the entire execution. That is how people are going to know you for who you are, and that will definitely help you build good sponsorship amongst every other individual who you have touched through the execution of this project. This is a summary slide on skills development. Broadly, it's about job skills and then the domain. And domain, as we seen earlier, is what we have learned at school, from the textbooks. And of course, through the project also, you would have learned the domain. So we have taken an example of IT, wherein you may have multiple technologies, and within technology, there could be multiple platforms. And for instance, if you're going to learn about Java, you're going to learn about coding, you're going to learn about the best, best tools, techniques, or the best way to code. You're also going to learn about coding for outcomes, right? It's so important to understand what your customers want. It's so important to understand the problem exactly that you need to solve. And you should remember that we are not coding just for fun. Well, you may be getting a lot of fun while you code if you really enjoy doing it. But we have to remember that the coding has to be aimed at solving the business problem, whatever that is, the outcome that is expected by your stakeholder. And of course, finally, having that discipline in terms of documenting and maintaining the right version control every time there's going to be a change, right? Other skills, there's communication, and in communication, it's all about, it's like a triangle, right? So you listen to the person who's talking to you, and you should make it a point to also tell, right? Sometimes it's about listening, it's about giving feedback, or it's about taking feedback, or it's about being participative in a conversation, and also reflecting on the conversation, right? In terms of what we have learned, what we have said, how we spoke, how so it's about communication. And coming down to problem solving, it's so critical about identifying what the real problem is, and not getting confused with the symptom of the problem to be the real problem. Or most of the times, what we want, we kind of write it down as the problem, right? So problem solving is it's so important that we are able to identify the right problem, and of course analyzing it, having the right method to solve the problem, picking up not one but multiple solutions, and then wearing the critical thinking hat in terms of picking that right solution to a problem, so that again, we'll bring the whole integrity thing into this picture on how we pick the right solution, considering the best interest of everyone, right? Thank you. Hi, welcome again to Dvija Projects. In this session, we are going to understand about the types of projects that we have, and just understand what is possible in terms of how we go about solving, as well as the whole documentation and all those aspects. So this slide is going to talk about hypothesis. If you're a science student, you've read about quality, you've read about Six Sigma, you all would have heard of this word hypothesis, right? To simplify this for discussion, we all make educated guesses every time there is a situation or every time there is a problem for us to solve, right? Now, in the corporate world, or more so in the academic side as well, when there is a problem or there is a project, it's not a question of just putting in what our educated guess is in terms of what could be causing the problem or how we believe the problem can be solved, and then we don't simply submit the report, right? What the point that I'm trying to make is, with all the skills that we saw in one of our previous lessons about the management skills, the critical thinking skills, and the technical skills, we use all that combined with the academic knowledge in terms of the domain knowledge that we have to come up with certain assumptions, right? And by nature, every time there is a situation, right, your mind, immediately starts attributing certain, factors that could be causing a particular problem. So it's no different when it comes to academic project. We are going to be tempted. It's no different when it comes to solving any business problem. We are going to be tempted to come up with certain educated guesses, right? We cannot avoid that. Now, however, it doesn't stop with that. So we bring in this term hypothesis, wherein it's nothing but a statement. The difference is the statement initially is an educated guess. You may also use the term a leap of faith assumption, right? Now, this leap of faith assumption is not just coming out of nowhere. It is backed up by your years of education. It is backed up by your years of experience. It is backed up by what you've experienced in similar situations. So those are the statements. But for you to really move forward, for you to sell this observation of yours, what I mean by sell is to convince others that yes, this is what you believe is a factor, a critical factor that is causing a problem. Or if you have made a guess about a potential solution on how a problem can be solved, we also need to back it up with evidence. So that's what a hypothesis is, where you take an educated guess, you take a statement, and then you take that through various tests by researching, right? You could be crunching numbers to prove it. You could be just going into a laboratory, testing and proving it. But basically, we all need to prove that the hypothesis that we came up is a valid hypothesis and hence is relevant. Again, it could be for what is causing the problem, or when you come to the solutioning phase and what you list as one of the options that can help you how to handle and solve the problem. We now come to the next slide on common project types, right? In the previous slide, we learned about how hypothesis it's not just an educated guess, right? What started off as an educated guess, had to be proved using research. So what you see here is a listing of various techniques, that we are also listing under project types on how you go about proving your hypothesis to be true. Well, your hypothesis may also be proved false when you take it through any of these types that are listed here. For example, a laboratory, right? You are a chemist, you're pursuing science. To prove your hypothesis, you may have to do some, few laboratory experiments. Literature, you're a law student. You can look at historical data. You could look at all the, all the case studies from the past on how certain cases were handled. So you can go through literature. You could also do meta-analysis, right? Wherein the data manipulation and analysis is involved. You are an engineer, you're trying to look at ways and means of optimizing the performance, and you want historical data of all the operating parameters for over maybe many, many years, coming from all the chips that are there, from all the sensors that are there. So meta-analysis is a ways, can provide you the ways and means of doing that number crunching to manipulate the data and analyze. Intervention, right? You're a medical student. You might need certain volunteers for you to perform a study, which is of course approved, legally, and you also legally enroll these volunteers. So intervention could be a way to prove your hypothesis to be either true or false. Questionnaire, collection of data, right? There could be a policy matter that you are researching on. You could be a social welfare student. You're pursuing your PhD in social welfare. Now, how do you go about this? A policy matter, right? So you have to prepare a questionnaire. You go about, try and survey a particular population. It could be living in a particular area, and using the questionnaire, you're going to gather that information to understand the impact of the policy issue. Finally, data handling, right, which is historical data analysis. A simple thing could be, you're a commerce or a finance student, you're trying to perform a stock analysis. You want to look at historical data in terms of how a particular script or a company has performed over a period of time, especially for the mutual fund. You may be interested in knowing how it has performed over many, many years, both in bearish and bullish conditions in the market. So these are, some of the leading ways, and I think we have fairly covered all the streams out there in the academia on how you can prove your hypothesis to be valid. Well, if you're unlucky, it could be invalid too. But you better be unlucky, because you don't want to pick up an hypothesis, which is merely an educated guess without any of these analysis, go all the way into problem solving, and then you deploy the result and you realize that it's not working, right? So these are very, very important for any student to ensure that they take them through these types. Now, finally, depending on the nature of the course that you're pursuing, the document or the report that you're going to submit is either going to be a research thesis or a project thesis. Let's understand what a project thesis is, right? It consists essentially of two elements. One, the project, and second is the accompanying essay. Isn't that so simple to understand, right? Looks like my job is done now. So a project thesis, yes, The project report, right? Yes, you're going to give the entire essay. This is very relevant if it is, if you're in business studies or you're talking about social welfare or any public administration, where you may have used questionnaire to gather details, but it is all about interpretation of the law. For example, if it is about a policy matter, and then the impact of it and what the general public is feeling about it. So it's going to be aggregation of all these facts and providing a good narrative so that the essay will help people understand what the issue is all about and what is the outcome of all the market research that has gone into it. So that's the project thesis. We now move on to research thesis. Research thesis is very relevant, especially for a science or an engineering student. This can also be very relevant for finance students, especially if there's number crunching that is going to be involved. And this is also an extended research paper, wherein you have gone into a very systematic inquiry. So you had a hypothesis, and then you would have either gone into a laboratory to test, or there could be an intervention in terms of enrolling multiple volunteers. So the time duration could be a lot. It could run into many months for you to even organize, get enough information for you to convincingly prove or validate the hypothesis. So it's a systematic inquiry into a phenomenon, which is the educated guess, or which is the observation that you could potentially be reporting, and then it is also a systematic inquiry into how you're attempting to solve using all the project types that we saw earlier. So finally, a research thesis, it will have the entire description in terms of the collection and analysis of information that you've got, and all the lab results, if so, or the historical data, and then the various formulas that you may have used to crunch those numbers, right? So that's the research thesis. Thank you. Hi, welcome back. Welcome to Dvija Projects. In this session, we're going to talk about starting your project. Now, isn't this very exciting? It's going to be an exciting part of our journey on how we take up projects. And if you've listened to all our previous lessons, we talked about the importance of experiential learning. We talked about how we need to pick up or learn job skills. You talked about building, management skills, critical skills, as well as the technical skills. We also looked at the different kinds of project types. And most importantly, we also talked about the hypothesis. So that's a quick summary of some of the critical aspects of the various lessons. And now this is really exciting for me to be starting this lesson on starting a new project. Now, any project, there's a reason why we all do, right? The biggest reason being, that's the expectation the university has for them to issue the graduation certificate. Every student is expected to go through a successful project and submit their project or the research thesis in terms of the final results on how they have completed their project, right? And of course, they're going to be awarding marks, and there are different parameters. It's a summative process, right? There could be multiple mini projects and a major project, and there are marks for each of these. And for also your final project, in terms of how we have gone through using some of the project techniques, tools, how we have brought together multiple, varied individuals from different backgrounds, and what sort of techniques or project types have you used to establish the hypothesis that you have for the problem. So all this is going to be carrying substantial marks. And if you have used all the elements that we have seen so far, it's going to help you secure 100%, if not 100%, whatever is the maximum that is possible. Now, coming to the project, before you start your project or your journey as a student to do a live project, it's always good that you answer some of these questions that we want to see. If not all the questions. So we at Dvija would request you to please go through these questions and try to put them to use, right? Because the whole idea behind experiential learning is to pick up job skills in the area of interest that you have, right? All the theoretical knowledge that you have around a specific domain, it is important that you pick up practical skills around that domain, and it's this project that's going to help. So it's important for you to decide first on what area that you would like to work on a project, right? Of course, this is going to differ based on a science student or a medical student or a law student or an information technology student. But the domain you belong to, what aspect of the domain would you like for an IT student? I mean, do you want to do a Java project? Do you want to work on artificial intelligence? You want to work on a blockchain, right? So it's good to understand the emerging trends which are out there in the market. It's good to understand what your interests are. Next, once you get a few ideas of a project. Now, what is a project here? We're talking about various opportunities, right? In terms of various problems that you can solve. So list out whatever comes to your mind, and then try to identify how that relates to your study curriculum. And once you narrow down to fewer such options or problems that you can consider for your project, start writing in your own words what a problem statement for this particular project, right? And what is the outcome that you're trying to deliver for each of that problems. It is also very important, that you're able to employ, as we saw in the previous lessons about the hypothesis and how you have various types of data to establish the hypothesis. So the problems that you pick, and it should be concerning with the domain that you're working on, and you should also be able to validate the hypothesis, right? So it's important that you pick such a topic. Now, moving on to point 6, you should also have an outcome for yourself, right? Yes, there's going to be an outcome for the project that's going to benefit somebody, but what are the outcomes that you're interested in getting? What are your development needs? Talk to your professor, talk to your parents, talk to your friends, talk to any other industry peers that you know of, any contacts in industry, and just do some self-reflection, right? So try and list out few things that you would also like to learn through this engagement, right? And finally, there's that next job, the big job that you would like to get into. So try to get some market facts around what are the skills that are expected for someone to shine and do well in that particular job. So collectively, all these points, should help you narrow down and pick that 1 or 2 problem statements, which would help you run through this process, and not just simply run through this process because that's what you need to get a degree, but also helps you build all the job skills that are needed so that you can land onto a successful job. We now move to the next topic. Again, the sum of self-reflection. And here, we'd like to facilitate this project selection process. We all inherently, tend to pick or make some choices based on our core personality, right? Now, sometimes as a personality or as a persona, you have maybe all the skills that are needed, to go be successful in how you execute that project. You could already be very successful in the academia. And yes, I'm very sure you can also be very successful in your job with all the skills that you possess, right? Now, we also talked of zooming in and zooming out in one of the lessons. So, when you do a self reflection, you're zooming in and you're zooming in on yourself in terms of what your skills are, what your personality is, what your interests are, and so on. It is also good to zoom out because end of the day, you're going to be working for somebody. End of the day, even if you're going to be a businessman, you are going to be providing goods or services to a customer who's going to buy. So we should always zoom out and try to understand what are the needs in terms of skills that the market is also expecting. What are some of the problems out there in the market, and what skills are needed, especially in your areas of interest, to go solve their problems, right? So here we have a simple test, which is going to come in the next slide, which would the type of those problems. I hope you're looking at the slide, with four boxes with nice bright colors there. There's red, yellow, green, and blue. The idea here is, we'd like to pick your personality type or personality color. And in the next page, we have a table that's going to help you pick what that project is going to be. So I hope you already picked your choice of color based on not just the color, but based on the details that were mentioned inside that box, right? So, if you look at this table, you have the project types and the personality colors. So if you had a blue, your choice could be something which would use a literature. Now, what are these project types? Just a quick recap of what we saw in one of our lessons. It is these types which will help you validate your hypothesis, right? And we said literature can be picked by somebody who's a law student and who wants to refer to all the historical cases so that he can provide, he can work on a project with that as the reference. So you have meta-analysis. So if you still have some questions around what a meta-analysis is or a questionnaire, when this will be used, I would like to request you to go and refer, at the previous lessons. But otherwise, these are the colors and these are the type of project types that you can choose. Now, the next slide, we talk about the whole aspiration piece, right? Yes, we have our inherent personality, we have our own choices, and there is a critical factor, which is for you to graduate, you need to complete a particular project, right? But I'd also mentioned about zooming out and really understanding what lessons that we need to, not lessons, but what are those other skills that we may require if we have to solve that big problem for our customer, right? So we do have to self-reflect for a moment to understand if we simply pick a project which just meets our personality, is that enough for us to grow and flourish and do well in an area of our choice, in your area of domain? For instance, you're in medicine and your personality is a very peaceful personality wherein you don't like to cut or dissect. Now, yes, but you want to become a doctor. You don't have a choice but to get into the laboratory and do a test, right? So that requires stretch. Now, stretch is one of the skills that we saw in one of our lessons earlier. So stretching is important. So though in the previous slide we have highlighted colors, we facilitated the process in terms of helping you pick one of your projects, but you may also want to do some self-introspection, the domain that you work for or the domain that you are currently pursuing in your academia. Talk to your professors, talk to folks in the industry, understand what are those other skills that are required. Now, if you have all those skills, nothing like that, I think you're going to rock, you're going to do well in your project. If you don't have those skills, you may want to stretch, you may want to understand what those are, and try and pick a project even though it's not matching your personality, so that you can also grow. Right now, by this time, you should have narrowed down to one or say two project ideas, which meet your personality, which also will help you build all the other skills that you may not possess today, which will also deepen your skills around the domain that you're working in. It'll help you build the management skills, the technical skills, and the critical skills that we had talked of that all of us should possess to be successful in our jobs. So, with all those criteria in mind, you should have a project idea. Now, sometimes, or if you have more than one project ideas, or even one project idea, it is good to get some quick feedback on the project and its viability, right? How long is it going to take? It could be a great idea, but it might require a lot of resources. Now, what I mean by that is maybe it is very intense in terms of capital or fund requirement. Maybe it's a project wherein you need to enroll, say, 100 volunteers for you to get all the data. So in those instances, your academic schedules in terms of the project completion dates from university may not permit you to embark on a journey to take up a complex project, right? So it's important to get feedback on the viability and just the nature of the problem that you have picked. Maybe complex, wherein you're not going to be able to solve it real fast. So take a project idea, get the feedback, define, understand the viability, and if it is viable, well, good, you're ready to go. If not, it's good to quickly refine the idea and maybe descope some aspects of the problem and narrow down to something which will still help you accomplish, if not all, most of the skills that you want to do. And you may want to do it, as many times as you can, so that you're able to get to that right problem. Of course, this cannot be an infinite loop. You got to come to if you're not able to do it yourself, it is always a good idea to get back to your mentor or your guide and seek their advice. Right. Finally, some helpful tips. During the year, it's always good, when you have still time to start your project, some notes about, what you like and what you dislike, and all the research papers, that you can find online that are available for you to read and use your library. Make good use of all the contacts that you have in the industry. If not, please make some contacts. Talk to your professors, talk to your seniors in terms of their experience, and also what are the success factors for your seniors. And again, especially if you're doing any project around social welfare or social work, it's good to be well aware of what's going on, about in the news about the problem or the area that you're going to pick. Be fully aware in terms of the recent developments, especially someone who's working on technology, or the emerging trends in technology in IT industry. Be aware of all the recent developments. And it's always good to pick your seniors or your professor's brain and their experience in terms of knowing what they've gone through in this journey. What are some of the common mistakes that people have made in the past? What are some of the good best practices that they have followed which help them to be successful, right? Now, finally, choose a problem that you feel is worth solving, of course, within the limitations of time that you have. Thank you. Hi, welcome again to Dvija Projects. This is a session on how to align your project objectives. So it's important to understand the expectations first, right? And in the previous lesson, we saw about you doing zooming in, doing some self-reflection in establishing what your expectations are, what skills that you should develop, or understanding what are the relevant skills that are needed for you to excel in a job in your domain of choice, and understanding where you stand in terms of what skills you already have, what are those additional skills that you need to build, and how you pick a project, right? Now, all these are setting those expectations. So there are your expectations, there are expectations from the industry, and not to forget the expectations from the college, your university, and your professor, which could be around the timeline, around the areas that they want you to work. We are now moving on to the constraints. You've done a great job in establishing what the expectations are from you, as well as from the industry and from the academic community. At the same time, it's also important that your project is able to, or rather, you will be able to effectively run your project considering all the constraints that can come your way. What are those constraints? There could be a constraint of cost, right? If you're doing an IoT project, there could be certain hardware that is needed. If you need to go out and enroll a lot of volunteers for, if you're a medical student and you need to enroll volunteers for whatever experimentation, and that also there's a significant consideration of cost that is involved. If you need to print a lot of questionnaires and then send them out in the market or engage a market research agency, that's also going to have considerable amount of cost. So in certain countries, in certain institutions, there is a budget earmarked for these students' projects, which may or may not be enough. So you got to be conscious of the cost as well as the resource availability. It could be hardware, software that you may require. It could be other people that you need to support you in this project. So it's very important to understand the constraints put into cost and resource, as well as the schedule and time. Right now, time is the project schedule in terms of the completion date that's given to you by the university. Of course, most of the times these dates are not moved. And they are cast in stone. So it's very important that you do all your activities in a manner that gives you enough time to also document your findings from the project, right? So the scope and quality as well, right? You may have a great problem statement, but you also have to be quite reasonable so that you're able to do it in the right amount of time, yet deliver a document wherein the quality of your document, the quality of research that is done is up to the mark, and also you're able to manage your scope. Right? There's no point in picking a project wherein you want to solve world hunger and you've got only 3 months to do it. Right? So please, along with expectations, have the cost, resource, schedule, time, scope, or quality. Understand the constraints to pick the right project. Finally, you may have, say, one project idea that's gone through all these stress tests in terms of meeting your expectations, and then also understanding the constraints, and then it's managed to clear off. If you have more than one, or even if you have one, with all the learnings you've got so far, it is good to refine your project. Right? So what was your initial idea? Was the groundwork done during the year? What's the feedback that you've got from professors or seniors? All the constraints that can impact or have a bearing on the successful completion of this project. With all those inputs, you then refine your problem statement, which basically is refining what is going to be your scope in the problem to solve. And also, try and define the end outcomes that can be delivered through this project. And finally, give it a nice name. It's all in the way you're going to brand your project. So a nice name always is quite inviting when people look at your project, right? So finally, you're going to be moving on to the project planning. So this is the time for you to take ownership of your idea and advertise your idea, talk about it, and then get into the planning. after you've given due consideration to all the constraints so that you can execute your project successfully. Right? So here are some helpful tips from us. So try and find the nucleus of your project idea, right? What is that core? What is that central theme of your project and everything that's going to go around your project, right? It could be that research, it could be that company profile, it could be that critical historical data, it could be that case study information from the past. So whatever that is, that's the core of your project idea. Just get a good understanding of what it is and try and get access. And of course, expectations of all the stakeholders. Get some timely feedback, and also understand. Through your research, try and secure all the resources that you've already established that you need from your research. Try and secure their availability, and also understand the limitations of every other aspect of this project. It could be with cost, all the constraints that we saw on the previous slide, right? So what is it that can come in the way of your your final result in terms of successful execution of the project? So this is the step, broadly speaking, right? So we have just gone through the design phase, and you have your problem ready and you're ready to run. It's going to follow by the whole design phase of with the problem that you defined. You're going to get data, you're going to do some number crunching, you're going to do some lab analysis, whatever is the project type that is relevant for you. You're going to design your experiments, basically, right? You're going to design what's that survey that you need to do. So you're going to design, you're going to get all that information. You're going to then move into the third step, which is to analyze and understand all the critical factors. If you look at the hypothesis in the design phase, you've also established what your hypothesis is, right? And if you refresh, these are not just some assumptions, but these are assumptions which are going to be backed by data to prove whether the hypothesis or the assumptions that you made, what we are also now calling as leap of faith assumptions, on how critical they are. So those are the results that are going to come off analyze, and then you would also start listing the solutions for these problems. You will also, again, go back to the same lab to prove if the solutions that you're recommending are going to give the desired results, which again is also going to be another hypothesis that you're going to prove that it works. Once you've done, it's time to do some good documentation around all the findings, after which you're going to conclude your project. And yes, very soon you're going to get ready to go have a nice party. Thank you. Hi, welcome to yet another session on Dvija projects. This session is about planning for your project work, right? So far, you've seen or you've heard the previous lessons on how you can select a project. We also talked about how to align the various objectives that you may have and the other interested parties like the college or the industry may have, and how that should help you decide on the projects. We also discussed about the constraints that may have or that may impact the successful execution of the projects, right? So with all those data, you would have already finalized on a problem statement that you're going to work. This session is going to help you on how you should go about planning for your project, right? So, any planning, if you look at the definition, it's all about knowing what to do, when to do, how to do, where to do, and who to do, right? So this achievement that you're going to get, or the achievement that you expect out of a good project, is going to be the result of a good plan, right? And planning comprises of various aspects. It's going to give you, or it's going to demand that you take time to create a project charter wherein you're going to define what that problem statement is. It's going to define what is going to be the scope of the problem that you're going to solve. It is also going to help you identify all the stakeholders that you should stay connected with. The whole constraints, understanding in terms of resources, people, time, and try and have all the communication that is needed to be delivered on a timely manner. So all those aspects are going to come, and this is going to be one good way of managing and eliminating all the risks that can come between you and a successful execution of a project. So let's look at what a project charter is, right? Simply put, it's a document, right? And it helps you draft, write, and formalize the scope of this project. You will also define what is that problem statement. And of course, it can't be an essay. It's going to be in few sentences that can best describe what that project problem is. It'll also have details on the scope. So you are aware by when you need to complete this project, and you will work backwards in terms of planning on the various milestones that you need to take care of. It'll also help you communicate this information to all your critical stakeholders on what is the expectation from a timeline perspective, so people are ready. It'll also help you describe what is the cost, what do you think are the various risks, and how you need support from the others concerned, so that they also provide you the required help in terms of handling those concerns, right? More than anything else, you as a project owner, it is in your best interest to list all this, take time to reflect on all these aspects so that you can reach out to the right people who can support you on a timely manner. Right, here is an example. It's a template that you can choose to use to put in your project charter. The first box, as you can see, is the problem statement, right? And as I said earlier, it cannot be a big essay. In few sentences, try to best describe what is the problem statement and what is the objective, right? What is it that you're going to try and solve from this problem? And what is the scope? Again, we are not going to solve world hunger in 3 months' time that you may be given to solve this, to do this project. So what is that big problem? And within that, what is that actual problem that you're going to narrow down, focus, and try and solve through this project? So also clarifying, putting that scope here so people don't make assumptions on what is the outcome that they can expect from this exercise. The very critical part, stakeholders, right? It of course will carry the most important people from your college who are going to support you in this journey, your guide, your advisor. But alongside, this will also talk about the other friends from your college. What I mean is your classmates who could also be part of this project. It would talk about the external parties. You may have a guide outside in the industry, you may have a mentor outside in the industry, or you're doing this project in a corporate, in one of their locations. So you'll also talk about all their entities, right? So whoever is going to get the benefit out of this project, whoever is going to support you in successful execution of this project. So all there, right? Alongside, you have the milestones, the cost, and whatever constraints, the project constraints that we talked of in the previous lesson. So all that information is going to be available in the project charter, right? So now that we have seen the project charter, the next task is to get into the whole scoping activity. You have the problem statement. You have now also defined what resources that you need for the project. What are the various objectives that you're going to meet by this project? And then you have narrowed down in terms of the final scope. What are the areas that you're going to touch? And you also establish the resources that you require, both the people, process, and technology. And by process, what I mean is what are the other departments or other folks from other internal or external agencies that you would require to successfully deliver this project. What are the funding needs? Maybe it's a self-funded project where you need to know how much money you require, or if it is going to be a corporate sponsor or your college that is sponsoring, they need to understand how much you're going to be spending here. And finally, the schedule, which is very clearly laid out in terms of the various milestones. And for each milestone, or for each task, you would also specify the resources that are going to support you in that. The idea is setting the stage, right? That's what you're doing here in this scoping exercise. You got everybody here in the meeting room, and you're gonna walk them through so that everyone is clear in terms of what you're expecting them to be doing, or what expectations they can have from you for this project. So we'll conclude with some what we believe as useful tips. Once a research idea is selected, there's always an excitement, right? There's always an excitement, and in that excitement, you start using this project methodology, and you also start identifying what are those constraints that can come in your way. Now, sometimes, they may demotivate you, but that's not our intent here. I think listing all the limitations or knowing the constraints ahead of time from the stakeholder list, knowing who's going to be on your side, who's going to be against you, is all going to help you, in setting the stage, in setting the expectations, and be prepared. Or be better prepared to handle those scenarios, because you already are aware and you would have already planned on how you want to solve those, right? So it's very important to understand the scope and align your expectations in terms of what is really going to be possible within the given constraint of time, resource, and the budget to deliver this project. Okay, so scoping is going to help you to break down the project deliverables to achieve tasks. Thank you. Hi, welcome back to Dvija Projects, and this is your journey of starting a project and executing a successful project, and we are here to give our best in terms of support to help you in this journey. In this lesson, you're going to look at how to successfully execute your project work. Now, as a student, by now you understand what is going to be the scope, you understand the deliverables, and you understand who your stakeholders are, right? And you also understand all the constraints now, and you also understand all the skills that you possess, that you need, what are the skills that the market is expecting. So this is great amount of information and knowledge, and we are really happy to have come this far with you in facilitating your journey in aggregating all this information, right? So we are going to deep dive in some of these critical aspects of stakeholder management, time management, communication, cost, risk, and finalizing the project report, because a good strategy is going to be, is going to provide you all the data that you need to be super successful in putting a good execution plan and also following through your execution plan. And of course, a good strategy plus a good execution will always result in a success story. So coming to identifying stakeholders. Now, stakeholders, this is such an important topic, right? Because, we are solving a problem through this project, but the end goal is, you want to land onto a good job, or you want to establish a startup or a business of your own. But it is all about working with and delivering things for customers, for your managers if you choose a corporate job. Now, when you're running a project, this is a great opportunity for you to go through all those experiences. So that's where you start building your stakeholders. Now, your stakeholders, on one side, you have the academic community, which is your college, your professor, your guide, and the university expectations. That's going to drive who those stakeholders are going to be. So they're going to monitor your progress on a project perspective. But you picked up a live project, and this is towards solving a problem. Either it's a social cause or it's going to solve a business problem, which means you're going to have folks from your customers who are going to benefit or who are today impacted by a specific issue, and you're trying to solve that problem for them, right? So they naturally become part of your stakeholders. Alongside, it is also important to take note of everyone else in the ecosystem who may be impacted through this project directly or indirectly, or who provide governance. For example, the government agencies, or there could be some censorship board, for example, if it's going to be about a movie. So all these individuals should be listed as stakeholders. Time management. This is so critical for you to be successful. And as we know, this is an academic project, and hence you don't have infinite amount of time here. Even if it is going to be for a PhD thesis, yes, you have considerably, more time. But again, the goal is try and meet all your goals and objectives within the time that you put in your project charter and that you've agreed with your stakeholders. Because it's not just about you and your time, but it is also about time that you want all your stakeholders to be available for this project, which is your academic pursuit. Yes, you're going to try and solve a problem that they're facing, but yet, this is something which is done for your interest. And hence, it's important to, list down all the activities, understand how much time it's going to take, understand how much of time commitment you need from your stakeholders, and plan ahead of time, and list all the deliverables, the key activities, what do you expect as the outcome from each activity, in what sequence, what are those activities that can be done in parallel, and then estimating the time and resources that are needed for each step, and then finally using that plan to track your progress, and also use the same plan to provide timely communication to all your stakeholders. Not finally, the next step is going to be on communication, right? So timely communication is very important. And also simple communication is equally important. So please manage your communication between the stakeholders. There are a whole lot of many ways of staying connected. You have the email, Skype, and you have video conferencing that's available. So find what best meets everybody's requirement. The goal is not to showcase that you're trendy. The goal is not to showcase that you're up to date in terms of using some of the latest tools and techniques that are available. Yes, you can demonstrate that you're aware and then you're using them, but the goal is to provide timely communication and very effective communication, right? So keep it timely, brief. Try and use the best technology that will help you deliver this message. And also, it's not just one-way communication. It's always good to also try and get feedback from your stakeholders so you don't have any surprises towards the end of the project. Cost management, right? Each of them are constraints that we have spoken in the previous lesson. But again, at the time of doing your project charter, you're aware of the budget. So it's always important to stay within the budget, and then plan. And again, look for ways and means where you can try and cut cost or you can keep this cost to the minimal. Yes, there could be a budget that is available. Sometimes maybe if you're lucky, it is surplus. But it's a good practice to try and deliver your project at as minimal cost as possible. Because when you go into the corporate world, that's another expectation is how, as an employee, and we wish you all the best, and we hope to see you do well and grow in your job, take up more and more responsibilities. But you're always going to be looked at how you're managing your stakeholders, how you're managing your time, and how you're managing your activities within the budget that was initially discussed. And the risk, right? All the constraints that we have spoken, in terms of people, time, and cost. Alongside, you also have to list out the other potential risks that might come in the way of you running this project, right? There are two aspects broadly in the project. One is the various critical factors that are causing the problem today that need to be solved. And there are also a bunch of factors that you're going to establish on what we should do to solve those problems, right? Now, both these are going to be activities that you will be following through, and there could be many risks that might come in the way of you successfully doing your research. For example, a lab test or an intervention in terms of enrolling volunteers, or doing some meta-analysis in terms of data being available, all the approvals that you might need for you to go through all these activities. So it's quite possible that you're learning some of these things that you've not thought of early on. So you should keep your list always up to date in terms of various risks that you're now seeing outside of what you'd already figured out, and try and maintain statuses and try and reach out to the people within the stakeholder group who can help you in mitigating these risks. So finally, some helpful tips. The student, as you start working on the project, the student should align the deliverables, and also align the same in terms of the timelines that have already been agreed and communicated through the project charter, and with timely communication. It's good to maybe maintain a dashboard to say that your costs are within control, that your resources commitment that you've got are being made available. If not, it's good to highlight all those areas that are in the red, where you need your stakeholders to support you. And you got to ensure that you are always facilitating this timely engagement from the stakeholders. And if you're not getting their support, is to escalate on a timely manner.